So, real off the cuff here, I've filmed one of these before, back in, I believe it was late 2021, just a raw, uncut, totally technical and nerdy panel tour of the airplane. Last time I did it, it was when we still had the 6-pack, we had the G5s, Garmin 430, and an engine monitor. Now, of course, it's looking a little bit different with lots of Garmin goodies in the panel.
I'm Josh, a pilot and flight instructor with a passion for the sky, sharing it with those around me and using it to see the world from a new perspective. Flying can seem super complex, but I've made it my mission to showcase safe practices while enjoying the beauty this world has to offer. Subscribe to climb into the cockpit on future adventures. This is Aviation 101.
80991, Addison ground, clear to Hotel Yankee India Airport. Via on departure, fly runway heading, expect radar vectors, show pull at 9er departure.
Personally, when I see an airplane sitting on the ramp, or like, ooh, that's a really pretty airplane, or I love that type of airplane, whatever, I always go up and look in the window. Like, the instrument panel, the interface between the pilot and the aircraft is just the part that fascinates me, and it's like the part that I kind of obsess over. It's the cockpit. It's just, we're pilots. Like, it's one of those things that, I don't know, it's the part that I love. So there's lots of really good stuff to fill the time and talk about. I'm going to talk about all the features and functionalities that we see right now on the panel. So, we can go into menus and change all kind of stuff, and I'm going to talk about all the different MFD pages and all that kind of stuff. But so much of this, especially on the Garmin G3X, and especially when you get into the experimental world, this is of course a Part 23 certificated airplane, not experimental, you get into an absolute world of customization on the Garmin G3X. So I won't get into like every little thing that we could possibly change. I'm just going to go over the way I have it configured now and go over all the different pages and whatnot. In the last video, I basically started on the left, and I just went down all the way to the right, down the pedestal here, and then the fire extinguisher down there. I just had a banana and orange and apple and stuff, so perks of the vinyl floors down here, they're easy to clean, so I can just throw my orange peels on the floor, and I'll throw them away when we get to the destination. I'm just going to go through and start showing you everything. So first and foremost, this is an iPad mini. People give me grief for flying with an iPad mini still, even though I have this whole panel, but here's the reason I like to fly with an iPad still. One, this profile view is awesome, which we get very much the same kind of view here on the G3X, mainly for terrain. I like the profile view on Garmin Pilot because it will show our terrain based on our altitude, our flight planned altitude, but it also shows airspace. So it kind of highlights, like, what am I going to go through on this flight? Do I need to worry about talking to air traffic control, to enter a Bravo or whatever it may be? I also like to be able to scroll around and say, oh, you know what? My tailwind's really nice on this leg, so what if I just kept going to this airport? And I can add that to the flight plan, like it says ETE an hour and 57 minutes to that point, and all that kind of stuff. I can go in and take a look at airports and read NOTAMs, all that kind of stuff, look at weather downrange. So I like being able to play with the flight plan on the iPad without it manipulating the avionics that are ultimately driving the autopilot. And we will get to that here in just a little bit. So this is an iPad mini running Garmin Pilot.
0901, contact Springfield approach, 124.905.
124.905, 80991, good day. 124.905, 80991, good day. I was on the wrong radio. 24.905, transfer. Approach Skyhawk 80991, level 9,500.
Okay, 0991, Springfield approach, Springfield Center 3008.
3008, 80991. So I will put 3008 right here, and that changes all of the altimeters across the panel. We can also do a split screen over here and have a full set of instruments with synthetic vision over there. Okay, so iPad mini, Garmin Pilot, we got that covered. Starting at the top left, this is a Garmin G5. This is basically our backup instruments. It has an internal battery, it runs on its own, takes all of its own pitot-static data from the airplane, of course. We have airspeed, true airspeed, ground speed, outside air temperature, current heading. The green notations up here are what modes the autopilot's in. Autopilot is engaged, that's AP. GPS mode for lateral guidance, and altitude hold mode for vertical guidance. That's set to 9,500 feet. Here's our altimeter, current altimeter setting. That's our CDI, little to show us lateral deflection on our course. And then you have a ball, which is an inclinometer, and then right below it is a turn coordinator. I'll kind of kick the rudder a little bit. You see that pink bar going back and forth? So that's actually a full-blown turn coordinator. So really, this is a full 6-pack. Has a backup battery there. I'll keep running down right below the G5 here. These are all of our light switches, currently running the beacon and strobes. Then we have nav lights, have the taxi light switch, and soon we're going to be adding wingtip landing lights too, and I'm going to add another switch that has does the wigwags and stuff. So taxi and landing light, and then there's the pitot heat switch. These are circuit breaker switches, so there are no circuit breakers for these systems. The switch itself is a circuit breaker. So if something went wrong with the strobes, it would actually kick the switch off. So that's kind of an interesting, unique thing there. Down toward the bottom of the panel here, got the primer in the classic spot that it was when this airplane came out of the factory. Avionics master switch, that's also a breaker switch. So avionics breaker, the whole bus is on that switch. Master switch, alternator, and battery master switch, and the good old-fashioned ignition switch. This one is upgraded. It's a nicer ignition switch that really locks the key in there, has good strong detents and everything. I skipped right over this guy. This is a GSB 15. Basically, it puts out 3 amps of power out of these 2 USB-C ports each, 3 amps each. So that will easily charge, 2 iPads, and also have another GSB over there that will charge 2 iPads at the same time as well. This is a Garmin G3X Touch. This is a 10.6 inch, and this is also the exact same thing. They are identical systems, but in many ways totally independent and redundant. All right, let's go below. I'm gonna talk about all the data that we have on this screen here in just a second. I'll get to that in a minute. This is a Guardian, I believe it's a Guardian 452. This is a carbon monoxide detector. It is linked to the avionics, and I can test it. It makes that tone whenever it does a self-test. And actually, if I go to info here on the G3X to data fields, we have CO parts per million. So I will actually get a carbon monoxide alert on the G3X if it starts to get out of whack. And actually, yesterday I had it start beeping at me at one point, but that's just because the CO ppm went up to like 5 for just a second, then came right back to 0. So that's a carbon monoxide detector. Right below that, kind of down here, let me sort of move the camera around. Down here is our breaker bus. Everything up here on top is on the main bus, and then everything down here is on the avionics bus. That includes camera power, which is all the way over here on the right. So those are the cameras mainly out on the wing here. That camera right there, which is a GoPro 360, you can see it's got a little wire going into a weatherproof plug on the wing. And that is actually powered by this breaker right here, and there's a couple of other of those power supplies in the wing. Those are TSO'd from a company called FlightFlix. They have since sold. I'm not sure what they're called now, but it's a minor alteration. It went in the logbooks and all that kind of stuff. So this is the entire breaker panel right here. Moving up, just below the G3X right here, that is the Smart Glide button. It's guarded, so I cannot push it. You flip up the little guard and press the big red button. Well, little red button, I guess. That is linked to the avionics, mainly to the 750. We have this sort of cyan glide ring around us. That's anything that's in our glide range. And right now we have cyan chevrons going to 2 Mike 0, or 2 Mike Oscar right there. That means that if anything happens with this airplane, this is a cool Garmin feature, if the engine quits, totally quits, I can just reach up and hit, boom, Smart Glide. The Autopilot will then take over, pitch the airplane for best glide speed, and turn toward that nearest airport. So it will actually turn down to 2 Mike Oscar down there and glide us straight to the airport. That frees up the pilot, so I have time to kind of deal with everything going on in the airplane and troubleshoot whatever I need to do. The Autopilot's going to hold best glide straight toward the nearest runway. If there is no nearest runway within the glide ring, it will just pitch for best glide straight ahead and audibly let me know over the intercom, Smart Glide active, no airports within glide. Or it will say airport, 2 o'clock, 2 miles, blah, 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 and it'll turn that direction. So that is Garmin Smart Glide. All right, so I think it's about that time for me to go ahead and start talking about the G3X. So this is really a monster of a system. So many capabilities on the Garmin G3X. Full flight display system. Of course, this is installed in a Part 23 certificated airplane. So some of the options are kind of limited, whereas if you install it in an experimental airplane, a lot of options are unlocked, and you can just go full customization on how you want it set up. I really like the way we have it set up right now. That's a little warning that just popped up. Inside parachute jump area. We're talking to air traffic control, so that's not a big deal right now, but I'll just start in the top left-hand corner. We got nav 1 active and standby, nav 2 active and standby. So the Garmin 750 here, which we'll talk about in a minute, is a nav comm. So it's got comm and nav frequencies, so it's a radio as well as a flight management system. And then this is the GNC 255 from Garmin. Also a NavComm. There are the comm active and standby and nav active and standby. I like having the nav radios visible right here on my primary flight display so that if I'm shooting a VOR approach or a localizer, ILS, whatever, using VHF navigation, I can see it'll show up in green the identifier for the station. The system will actually listen to the Morse code, whichever Garmin radio it's coming from. It'll listen to the Morse code and put the Morse code identifier right there. And at a quick glance, when I brief my approach, whether it's here or here on the chart, I can just glance and make sure the identifier is correct on the active there. So I like having those there. And of course, we can switch and tune frequencies from here and everything. So totally interactive. And
Sorry, Kyle, how do you hear?
Totally a touch screen. I'm going to turn down that second radio real quick. So those are nav radios up there, right? Right here we got a timer visible. That's an option. You can get rid of the timer, but I'm old school. I like to do timed procedure turns and all that kind of stuff, even though the GPS will do it all for us. Full engine monitor right here, and I have chosen to have this visible at all times on the primary flight display. I can also tap it, and it brings up the expanded EGTs and CHTs manifold pressure. Over here I got fuel endurance. We got 3 hours, 32 minutes of fuel left. No wind range is 398 nautical miles. We're doing 18 miles per gallon, but with a 14 knot tailwind, so cheating a little bit. But 28.7 gallons remaining, and we're doing pretty good on fuel endurance, actually. That's pretty nice. We can tap it, make it go away here. Data fields at the top. We got distance to destination, 169 nautical miles. Estimated time and route to destination, 1 hour, 19 minutes. Our next waypoint is Hotel 88. Fuel endurance is 3 hours and 33 minutes of fuel remaining, and we have 28.6 gallons remaining. So I like to have all those data points visible up there. Those are all totally customizable, so good thing to keep in mind there. This is the split screen button, so I can split to the MFD, use the big knob to scroll through all the pages here. We'll talk about that in a minute. Go back to full screen there. So full engine monitor, visible here on the G3X, 2500 RPM, 2530 RPM right now. We're doing 8.2 gallons per hour. Fuel PSI is 74 pounds per square inch. 179 degrees on the oil. The carburetor is actually right at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which I can warm it up with the carb heat here to make sure that we don't build up any ice. Left fuel, right fuel tanks, how many gallons we have? 13.5 volts. Amps are +1 charging. The battery is charging. And then we just have kind of like an abbreviated graph of our CHTs and EGTs down there. We're running rich of peak, so they're not too even right now. But it's good to be able to see all that stuff at a glance. Hottest EGT is 1495, and hottest CHT is 383. This bar right up here at the top is also the scoreboard for the Autopilot, just like over there on the G5. It's mirrored. It's all the same stuff. Autopilot is currently engaged. We're in GPS mode and holding altitude at 9,500 feet, which is bugged here. Obviously, you can see the whole thing is an attitude indicator. We have our airspeed tape over here. At the top is our true airspeed, 113 knots. We are indicating 99, and our ground speed is 126 knots. And right beneath that, we have our winds aloft. So this whole system is actually calculating on the fly what the winds up here are doing. So we have a 13 knot tailwind component, 16 knot crosswind component. Wind is 300 at 20. Not bad. On the left inset here, I just have the active flight plan. All of this is touchable too. I can touch that, it goes straight to the flight plan. Hit back, go back to full screen. So we're simple VFR flight, clear skies, not really going anywhere crazy. We're just direct to Hotel 88. And then on the right inset, I have the map. I like the map on the right inset because my right hand is usually free on the controls here. I can reach up and tap it, bring up the map, and then zoom in, zoom out, do whatever I have to do. And the map is easily the most used page for me on the multifunction display. Numbers here, our current heading is 077 degrees. We got the cyan heading bug here. This is a full-blown HSI. Right now it's magenta needles, taking information from the flight management system, the GPS 750 over here. Current heading bug, sorry, is 077. Current heading is 071, and course is 079. This is another little CDI. It's just mirroring what the middle of the HSI is doing, left and right. And that ball is an inclinometer, so it works just like a turn coordinator. It shows how coordinated we are. And our actual turn coordinator is actually right here at the top of the HSI. It's that little arc that goes left and right. So if I kick some rudder, you'll actually see the turn coordinator bar kind of swing back and forth. So that's actually the turn coordinator there. It shows us standard rate and everything. On the left-hand side, we got our altitude tape. Current altitude is bugged at 9,500 feet, and we are indeed holding 9,500. On the right-hand side, this is vertical speed. It goes up and down to show how fast we are climbing or descending. And the altimeter setting, 3008 inches of mercury, is what we are calibrated to, which is the nearest airport there. We have two duplex knobs on either side of the Garmin G3X. On this side, I believe this is configurable, but it's not, maybe not on the certified airplanes. I personally never messed with it. We can adjust altitude with the outer bug and heading with the inner bug just to adjust those bugs. Then over on the other side, right now the outer knob does baro, but I hardly ever use that because I just do it on the G5 and it changes everything else, so I just do it there. We got a nearest button that'll come up, you hit that and it shows you nearest airport information with tower frequencies and everything. We have a direct button on the G3X just in case maybe you're flying in like a experimental VFR only airplane that you don't have an external GPS hooked up. Then the G3X has its own GPS built in. And the antenna for it is actually right up here on the glare shield. That's where it is in this airplane. And then right next to it is the antenna for Sirius XM weather and radio. So a little bit of a sidebar there, so that's what the direct button is for. Menu, you push it once, it brings up the menu for whatever current page you're on. Push it again, and it brings up the G3X master menu. And then of course a back button, which basically just gets you out of whatever you were doing. So that's for the most part the G3X, everything we see here on the G3X. So the exact same thing is over here. There's two of them in this airplane. I don't feel like I need to go over everything over here because it's identical to this system. They are independent in their own, they share one ADAHRS unit, but they're separate displays. This is an independent ADAHRS and air data unit.
Hey everyone, Josh here. I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank all of you for the support for the content here on Aviation 101 for almost 15 years now. My content on YouTube will always be free to enjoy, but has never been free to make. I like to keep the sponsors of the channel relevant to the content and relevant to all of you. So I'm not going to start talking about like a website builder or a VPN service or anything like that. But if you're in the process of learning how to fly or pursuing your instrument rating, this one's for you. One of the awesome sponsors of Aviation 101 is called Plain English, and they've developed an app called RSIM, or Aviation Radio Simulator. As a flight instructor, I've found one of the hardest things to teach to a student is radio phraseology and procedures. It just takes repetition to learn the flow of the lingo. And with everything a student is trying to absorb during a busy lesson in a busy cockpit, I find that the most common way to learn radios is with a little guidance from the instructor, baptism by fire. But in this modern digital age, there's no need for that. If you want to sharpen your radio skills, phraseology, and procedures, check out the RSIM app by Plain English or visit plainenglishsim.com. And you can use code AVIATION101 for 10% off when you sign up on their website and start practicing your radio skills anytime, anywhere. Back to the video.
The G3X, it'll do all the same stuff. Engine monitoring. The only difference is on the top here, I also have the comm radios on either side as well. And then these data points in the middle are fuel over destination, so that says how many gallons we're going to have when we land at our destination. 18.3 gallons, and then estimated time to vertical navigation. So if I go into the FMS and I say, I'll actually do this right now. I'll tell you what, I'll do it here in just a second when I start talking about the 750, but estimated time to vertical navigation is basically how far until we begin our descent, or climb, or next vertical point on our flight plan. So this G3X does all the same stuff as this G3X. Having two of them in the system allows you more points where I can like put extra data points that are visible to me and everything like that. But they do the same thing. So I'm going to do most of my stuff over here because it's easier for me to reach. I'm going to just show you the MFD. We got a map here, shows all airspace traffic and everything, and you can see all of the different pages here listed at the bottom. Use the big knob, we'll go over to chart. You can do IFR charts, VFR charts. I keep this set to the VFR chart usually. All waypoint information. So it auto-populates the waypoint that makes the most sense for us. That is the destination. So airport info, frequencies, and the cool part is I can actually hit one of these frequencies and tell it which radio I want it to load into the standby, because these are all Garmin radios and they're all tied together. That's a really cool, nice capability. Runway info, it ties in with the weather, so it tells me about all the wind stuff. Weather at that airport when we get there, or the nearest airport. NOTAMs, airport directory, and charts. It'll show me basically any approach plate I want or anything like that. So that's waypoint info. Go over to flight plan. So it basically just shows an expanded version of what's in my 750. That's where it's getting its data right now. Flight plan source is external GPS, because we fly IFR in this airplane a lot, and the GTN 750XI is our source for navigation. We got the weather page, which is what I'm flying with, visible over there. That's Sirius XM winds aloft. You got NEXRAD, you got cloud tops, you got echo tops, you got winds aloft. Goodness, you have everything. Temps aloft, lightning, storm cells, METAR, airmets, SIGMETs, TFRs, pilot reports, freezing levels, turbulence, forecast. Got surface level, surface analysis. It's nuts how much data you have, and that's all Sirius XM stuff. Winds aloft, especially in this airplane on a clear day, is what I'm mainly worrying about. So that's what I fly with most of the time. Terrain, we're over Missouri, so there's not much to speak of, but it'll show you a profile and show us kind of like a radar type view, where it shows what is ahead of us in terms of terrain. Here's a traffic scope. You can zoom in, zoom out. Pretty standard. Sirius XM music, so we can unmute this.
They knocked on his screen door and he said,
so you can mute, unmute it there. So that's Sirius XM music. You got all the stations and all that kind of stuff. And then info, this just tells us our satellite status. We're pulling off the 750 right now. And then just some customizable data fields that I have here. And then engine data. Manifold pressure, EGTs, CHTs, engine hour, TAC hour, and fuel data, and all that kind of stuff. So super, super useful system. That's the Garmin G3X. Go back to full screen here. And how are we doing? We got a 16 knot tailwind. Not bad, not bad. So all of the engine data, pitch, roll, literally every piece of data that this thing could possibly put out to you, it's currently recording it on this SD card. So if you ever come up with an engine issue, or it did something weird on the last flight or whatever, you can always pop out your card, pop it into your computer, use certain apps. Savvy Analysis is what I use for engine stuff. And you can go look at your engine data, like, oh, number 2 EGT was doing something weird, or blah, blah, blah. You can check all that stuff. So, all right, Garmin GTN 750. We know how these things work. It's a Garmin it's a Garmin GPS. I do have the remote audio panel, so I can control all the radio stuff right there. Got all the intercom functions right here. The isolates, so I can disconnect me from any other jacks in the plane. We have music controls. How do you mute the music? Who's hearing the music? And Bluetooth controls. I do not have a remote transponder. We already had the GTX 345, so we just left it in the airplane. So we have an actual transponder with a head unit right here. This is how we control what we're transmitting and receiving on. So right now I'm listening on comm 1 and 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I was listening to Chelsea on. And I am talking on comm 1. I can switch that, talk on comm 2, disconnect the other comm, whatever you want to do. But it does default to listen to whatever radio you are currently talking on. So pretty intuitive. Comm radio, put in a frequency, you can hit transfer and it auto flip-flops. Same thing with nav, put in a frequency, it auto flip-flops. The map page here, which is what I normally fly on, shows traffic, terrain, weather, all that good stuff. Can hit home here, and you got map, traffic, terrain, FISB weather, so it's got like a separate weather page to it. Charts, flight plan, procedure, so that's where we go to loaded departure, arrival, approach. Nearest airport, of course, or nearest nav aid. Waypoint info does a lot of the same stuff the G3X does. And services is not enabled right now on this airplane. But utilities, VNAV, trip planning, fuel planning, all this kind of stuff. We got timers, scheduled messages, and just system settings and emergency mode, which is Smart Glide. There's a Smart Glide button in the 750 right there, but I have the actual guarded button on the panel. One thing the 750 does, I also customize these two buttons at the top. Normally you can put like any data point you want right here. I like to have the map button visible so I can get back to the map from wherever. And then procedure is another one that I use all the time. So I made those two buttons visible there. Desired track and track, I set to be visible there. And estimated time en route to the next waypoint, I have time and distance to the destination, time and distance to the next waypoint. So I have those visible at all times. This is a quick way to get to the flight plan. So we are currently BVO to H88. You can add waypoints, manipulate everything. And actually this is what I was going to do here earlier. So I'll go to waypoint info here. I'm going to round up to 900 feet, add 1,000 feet. 1,900 feet is going to be my pattern altitude. So I'm going to tap next to H88, the altitude box. 2 miles before the airport, I want to be at 1,900 feet. Enter, save. I'll go back to the map. Now, I'll have to zoom out just a little bit. It's hard to see. It's kind of covered up by the 1900 there, but there's a dot right there. It's called TOD, top of descent. And now, it's saying I will start my descent in 51 minutes. And that is fully coupled with the autopilot. It'll give me a audible enunciation and give me a warning and all that kind of stuff. So, really freaking cool on the flight management system there. Tons of settings you can change on the 750, and it's fully coupled to everything else. Briefly talked about the GNC 255. This is just a really nice modern navcom and with a monitor function, so I can monitor one frequency while actively staying on another frequency. GTX 345 transponder, so this is ADS-B in and out. Ties into all the avionics, so the iPad or iPhone, whatever you're using, is actually connected via Bluetooth to the 750 and to the GDL51 for Sirius XM. So that's the ADS-B transponder, and right here is my favorite part of all of this, the Garmin GFC 500 Autopilot. You got heading mode, track mode, nav mode, track mode, heading, and then of course approach mode when we're doing instrument approaches. Fully coupled, 2-axis autopilot. Got a roll servo and a pitch servo. I do not have yaw damp. I wish I did, but it's not certified on the 172. Blue level button. So if you get out of whack and you get in an unusual attitude and kind of getting squirrely all over the place, you get turned around, push that blue level button, and the airplane the autopilot so smoothly but assertively snaps the airplane back to straight and level in a very safe manner, and gets you where you need to go while you kind of get your bearings again. This is an up-down tick wheel. It's got like little detents in there that you can feel, very tactile. Same thing with the heading knob and the altitude select knob. And at any given time, you can push to sync. So like right now, we're cruising in nav mode, and the heading bug is actually a little bit off our current heading, if I can get it to focus here. So I'm going to push the heading button, and it syncs the heading bug with our current heading. Same thing with the altitude knob, but of course we're right on our altitude bug, so you don't want to be syncing that. So these are horizontal modes, these are vertical modes. So this is like controlling left and right, this is controlling up and down. These are master controls. So right now we are in nav mode. The flight director is on, which it has to be in order for the autopilot to be engaged, or for any modes to be active or armed. And the autopilot is engaged, the servos are engaged. And we're just simply in altitude hold at 9,500. We can climb or descend in indicated airspeed mode, in vertical navigation mode, which is what we're going to do when we reach that top of descent for pattern altitude, or we can use vertical speed mode. I always climb this airplane in indicated airspeed, so it'll just hold VY or hold VY plus 5 knots or whatever I want. And then I always descend in vertical speed mode, 500 foot per minute or 1,000 foot per minute, whatever I want to do. Right below that, we have a required placard here for the Power Flow Tune exhaust that basically just says, use caution. This airplane burns more fuel than from the factory at full power. This is the carburetor heat. This is the go-around button. Push the go-around button. It does 2 things. Sets the flight director for 7 degrees nose up and wings level, so as if you're doing a go-around or a missed approach. And the second thing it does is it tells the 750, hey, go ahead and load the missed approach. We're going missed. So even if you're on autopilot, you can add full power and push go-around, and the autopilot will pitch up and execute the missed approach for you. It'll put it in go-around mode, so you do have to rearm your modes, but really freaking cool. So that's why it's right there by the throttle. You go full throttle when you're going missed or doing a go-around, and push go-around. Throttle, mixture, flap switch, and flap indicator to indicate how far down the flaps are. Cabin heat, which I'm actually pulled out, using it a little bit today. Cabin air, which I have fully closed, and a glove box here with the pretty Aviation 101 logo on it. And down here,
Cessna 302.
nice little addition we added to this airplane is glare shield lighting, and we can choose between white and red. So that's actually up here under the panel, and it's fully dimmable. So that's white, that's red, and we can dim them for night flying. I like to use white for getting the airplane ready, setting up avionics, and then when I'm actually flying at night, I like to put it on red and really dim it down. Alternate static air, I like to test that every now and then, but that basically just brings your static instruments to an alternate static source in case your outside static source gets clogged or freezes up or anything like that. Elevator trim, and I'm going to get to the yoke here in a second. We have a control for that electric trim. This is an auxiliary mic with a push to talk, and fuel selector right down there. Left, right, both, and off. There's my banana peels again. Here's my knee board that I haven't really used here. And between the seats, we have an aviation grade fire extinguisher. This is a halon fire extinguisher. You've got to use a halon fire extinguisher because otherwise it will just fill the cockpit with powder, choke the pilot out, and you won't be able to see a thing. So, definitely important. All right, and on my yoke here, I have a handful of controls, and there's a couple controls on that yoke too, but I'll talk about on my yoke here. So this is elevator pitch trim. So we have an elevator trim servo, which is nice. I don't have to touch the trim while the autopilot's on. But when I'm hand flying in the pattern or whatever it may be, it's nice to be able to do trim up, trim down. This is autopilot disconnect, or momentarily hold it, and that actually turns off envelope protection, which is another feature that we have with the GFC 500. Basically, envelope protection is on by default. If I'm hand flying and I exceed 45 degrees of bank or exceed 30 degrees in pitch, envelope protection will actually use the servos to bump the yoke and say, hey, you're in an unusual attitude, correct yourself. PTT is push to talk, so that's my mic button to talk to air traffic control. Here's ident, transponder ident. I also have an ident button right there, so kind of neat to have an ident button right there on the yoke that I can just whack if ATC wants me to give them one. And then PTC, push to command. So I'm going to try this out real quick. Here on the 750, this is a Garmin 750 feature, so I'm going to say, show destination NOTAMs. There goes, no NOTAMs available for the destination airport. I already checked earlier, there are no NOTAMs. Or I can say, tune destination Unicom. And it puts it into the standby there, 122.8. There's a ton of commands. I was actually given a book by Garmin that says all the commands that you can say, and I have not memorized all of them. There's a million of them. But that's pretty much it. I mean, it's really standard in terms of the master switch, primers, all the switches down here. The factory light switches used to be down here as rocker switches, but we filled that all up with breakers. And I think a much more intuitive spot for the switches, which is actually what Cessna does in modern Cessnas, is mount them all right here. And they're good tactile toggle switches, definitive clicks in the on and off position. You can at a glance, instead of looking around the yoke, see where everything's at. And I put these little rubber covers on them to color code them. Just super nice. Daytona Aircraft Services in Daytona Beach, Florida did an absolutely amazing job setting up this panel, and then of course all the Garmin avionics are absolutely beautiful. Ooh, I am so sorry. almost forgot. Another good feature that I really wanted to have is a remote ELT switch. So we have an RTX 345 ELT in the tail, and that is also a 406 megahertz modern ELT, and I have a switch up here on the panel where I can remotely activate the ELT. If I just had an engine failure and I know I'm going down, I'm going to have to put it into a field, just in case my emergency landing is buttery smooth and doesn't set off the ELT, I can go ahead and turn it on there ahead of time. Of course, all joking aside, my landing is not going to be butter, most likely, but it's nice to be able to just turn on the ELT just in case for some reason it doesn't go off on the forced landing. That's the cockpit of 80991.
901, Kansas City Center now 128.35.
128.35, 80991, good day. All right, 2835, and transfer. It goes ahead and switches the frequencies.
280, contact St. Louis approach, 132.12, 3212, take care.
Kansas City Center, Skyhawk 80991, level 9,500.
Skyhawk 80991, Kansas City Center, hello, maintain VFR, forming altimeter 3003.
300 maintain VFR, 80991. All right, 3003. That's the cockpit of 80991. It's very technical. Lots of little things that you learn about your panel when you fly on long cross countries with it. And whatever airplane I sort of add to the fleet, my dad and I both fly this 172. I'm ready to step into kind of a more of a cross country platform, so something that's going at least 160 knots. Once that happens, I'm really going to be seeking to put a very similar panel in that airplane, because this is so capable, so amazing, and it really takes all the questions out of cross countries. Do I have enough fuel? What are the winds doing? What about weather ahead? All that kind of stuff. This panel is just so amazing, and it really does make the flying a lot less stressful, especially with this 2-axis Garmin Autopilot that just absolutely flies on rails and leaves me so much less fatigued than I would be if I had to hand fly all day. So I appreciate you watching and tuning in for this super nerdy, super technical cockpit tour, and leave your questions and comments, all that kind of stuff down in the comments below.